Today, I want to talk a little bit about Blood Death Knight and my experience playing it so far on the beta and talk about everything that's kind of like working well and also what's not really working well. Now, this is coming off the back of my stress testing video that I did a couple days ago at this point. So I've been kind of going through each of the tanks now in a more of a focused video because I didn't feel like I could do each tank justice by like trying to cover everything in one video. So I've already done Brewmaster and Warrior. So this video, I'm just going to talk about Blood Death Knight, the experience doing that test, along with some other kind of maybe some gameplay factors that are more relevant in actual Mythic Plus versus like a solo test encounter. So yeah, we're gonna just jump right into this one. So Death Knight was a kind of a really unique experience when it came to testing. So in this video that I was able to do, Sand Lane was able to live on average for about 2 minutes. Now this is kind of awkward because like I ended up doing way more than 5 attempts, and some of the pulls I only lived for like 40 seconds or 30 seconds. I'll get into it in a bit, but there's a lot, not only a lot of bugs in Death Knight that are like more noticeable to the impact of the game and your survivability. But it's just like it's like just also kind of poorly tuned. So I'll get into that here in a bit. But I was able to live for like 2-ish minutes on average if we're looking at this data specifically, and same thing with Deathbringer. So I don't think Death Knight's in like a terrible spot, but for a tank that has always been deemed as like a self-healing tank, compared to some other tanks, they were just not as good. Like even, DH was able to live a lot longer. Even Prop Paladin was able to keep up with these live times. Guardian Druid trumps it. Some of my best pulls on Mountain Thane were able to get closer above the average of Death Knight. And so that's just like a weird thing to kind of wrap your head around. Now, Sand Lane went through a lot of trial and error when I was playing it because this is a tank that went from being like way overtuned and had a lot of bugs working in their favor to getting those things fixed in recent weeks that have now made them like below middle of the pack. So in my testing, I ran through, I think I played almost every talent build variation that I could possibly think of to help live. But ultimately, what it comes down to is there is a couple of very specific bugs that are currently happening that really hurt the Death Knight's ability to kind of generate resources to be able to live. Because that's what Death Knight has always struggled with in Mythic Plus is that you're going to be limited by your ability to generate resources. And unfortunately, you have essentially an arbitrary cap based on your haste and your ability to spend runes efficiently and then Death Strike at an appropriate time. But eventually, if you can't spend runes fast enough or can't consume the runic power fast enough, the damage intake, if it's too high, you will probably fall over without very specific group coordination, CCs, lockdown, etc. So the biggest problem, not even in reference to Sand Lane, but right now Heartbreaker is not currently working, which means that our runic power generation is really low. Now, this isn't necessarily a talent that maybe all Death Knights will play with, especially as we get into later seasons where your haste ends up becoming really, really high, or you're not feeling super haste dependent. But because we not only have low haste because of both the stat squish as well as being in a new season, what I've noticed is that runic power generation just feels like kind of low, and so you're going to value these things that generate additional runic power. Now, Heartstrike by itself generates 15, and auto attacks generate 3 runic power. If we come over here and I just slam a quick Heartstrike, I'm going to be at 18 because I also successfully auto attacked there. But I also hit one target. Now, if I drop Death and Decay, my Heartstrike should now be cleaving, right? Heartstrike hits up to 5 targets. And if I Heartstrike here, I'm still only going to go up 15 from 45 to 60. Despite having this active, despite hitting all 3 of these targets, I'm not gaining additional runic power. I think this is one of the biggest contributors to why Death Knight feels really bad. This isn't specifically to Sand Lane. This is just Death Knight in general. And so the other issue that I'm currently having with Death Knight is their Apex talents. These have been nerfed over recent weeks. In like early weeks and in alpha, it was insanely busted. You had like I think on average you were like 60 to 70% uptime, somewhere in there on your Dancing Rune weapon being active, sometimes having 2 weapons, sometimes just having 1. But either way, it was really, really impactful to the gameplay loop. Since those changes, and actually like before those changes as well. So as you spend runes, you have a chance to summon a random rune weapon. But the issue is if you have a proc of your Apex talents, what ends up happening is if you get a proc and then you use your Dancing Rune weapon, it kind of like eats up your cooldown, and you're actually gonna like have less uptime on Dancing Rune weapon now because of that bug. So right now I have Dancing Rune weapon, it is active for 3 more seconds. I'm gonna hit Dancing Rune weapon, but as you can see, the buff is now gone and my weapons are still active and they're able to apply, but you're missing out on like the parry chance and the DR from that. And so you kind of like fall over. So you really, really have to pay attention to this Dancing Rune weapon buff, or you just get demolished. And that was what I was running into in my tests is like, as someone who's not as experienced playing Blood Death Knight and definitely not having any add-ons currently, I'm used to having add-ons to like micromanage or manage some very specific buffs. And I'm used to like progress bars, for example. And while the progress bar currently, from the cooldown managers, like it's like okay, it's just getting used to. But this is kind of my biggest problem is that not only is runic power generation at all-time low, you're able to like eat your dancing Rune weapon, which I think would be fine in a world where you're still getting cooldown reduction from having like bone shields getting consumed, but we no longer have that, which I was okay with before, but now I'm kind of hating. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on DK because I think the DK playstyle actually feels really good. But the last thing I kind of want to talk about is with Sand Lane. I believe it was Visceral Strength. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Kyras has corrected me the other day in stream, but I don't remember because I have a goldfish brain. Visceral Strength used to, or at least on live servers, if you were blood boiling more than basically two targets, two or more targets, it would generate you a bone shield stack, which felt pretty good because with Sand Lane, the whole gameplay loop is basically you want to like proc vampiric strikes and then utilize vampiric strikes and heart strikes. Like that's the entire gameplay loop. So it feels really, really, really bad to have to spend resources on generating bone shield. And now there's definitely like improvements there. I think Bone Collector feels pretty good. Whenever you grip an enemy, you gain a bone shield charge. So now you're being rewarded for using utility. Things like Death Strike, even things like Gorfiend's Grasp, generate significant bone shield charges. Like if you have 8 targets on a pull and you Gorfiend's Grasp, you gain 8 bone shield charges, which is awesome. Even if you run Abomination Limb or Slappy Hands, whatever you want to call it, very good. Every time you're pulling an enemy, unfortunately it doesn't do damage anymore, but every time you pull an enemy, you're gaining a bone shield stack. So Bone Collector is a nice improvement, but with a gameplay loop of having to spam Heart Strike, but then it's like it feels counterintuitive to then spend 2 runes on Marrow Rend or weaving in Death's Caress because Death's Caress, like let's be honest, it doesn't do anything. It's a way for a Death Knight to pull a mob from range, generate 2 Bone Shield stacks, and apply Blood Plague from a distance. But in melee, it doesn't do anything. Like it doesn't feel good rotationally, but you kind of are incentivized to hit it to manage your rune resource. So I think Sand Lane with the removal of like the Visceral Strength Bone Shield thing, uh, it feels pretty terrible. Your rotation is like these 5 buttons basically here on my bar, and that's it. Now the variance in single target testing was kind of wild because of these kind of factors that I've talked about up to this point, but in group content, I will say that Death Knight actually doesn't feel that bad. It feels very thematic to how it always has felt. You do feel like a Live Lord. When you have a little bit of external or group healing that's coming through, you have DRs from your healer that are coming in, and you have like breaks between pulls, and you have CC that's going out from your damage dealers or yourself. Death Knight, it's hard to tell, at least in 15 keys, that there's really any issue or underlying issues within the gameplay loop. So Sand Lane feels pretty good. Your rotation is basically like Heart Strike, Blood Boil, Death Strike. And then you want to obviously maintain more than 5 Bone Shield charges. This is going to be pretty easy to do, but it's going to really require you to like focus on your Apex talents. I don't think there's a world where you can just ignore your Apex talent though. The capstone is obviously still pretty powerful. And then when you do get a Dance of Midnight proc, when you do Marrow Rend, at least you're gaining a large influx of bone shields versus just like 3. So that's like the only trade-off, but Marrow Rend is still too expensive and does not feel good to hit. Unlike other abilities, like whether it's like Shield Block, which is off the global and doesn't really require much, or even things like Shield of the Righteous, which is your mitigation, but also a massive damaging button. So those were most of like the bugs and issues I had with Sand Lane. Now swapping over to Deathbringer, I think Deathbringer it's a hero talent that I've definitely not been a fan of, both on live and in early beta testing, just because Sand Lane felt so good because Visceral Strength technically was still working like how it used to. But ever since that change, and with more practice and time spending on like playing Deathbringer and playing around like Reaper's Mark, I think Deathbringer is in a much better spot, both gameplay wise, because, well, gameplay wise and just like survivability wise. The main reason that I've been able to kind of come up with why it feels better is because Reaper's Mark, as well as like these additional nodes here that turn your dancing, when you use Dancing Weapon, you basically get to exterminate immediately. So you basically have like kind of like two exterminate windows where one you're applying Grouper's Mark, the other one is just when you're using your cooldown. So you can kind of like either rotate between the two or you can use the two back to back. But it's lowering the cost of Mirror Rend and it's causing you to send out your exterminate sites. And so when you're playing this, it like feels pretty good because the thing that feels bad for Sand Lane, it's like being reduced and it's rewarding for Deathbringer. And so it solves my major complaint. So yeah, when you be dancing your weapon, which again I just ate it because I'm not paying attention. But now when I marrow rend, it does the exterminate and you get two of them. So I can like kind of just like delay a little bit and then I can hit it again for another big exterminate doing some pretty sizable damage. And so when you're playing Deathbringer, the only thing that now kind of matters is the fact that you can still munch your dancing rune weapon and the fact that your runic power generation still feels a little low in some cases, but you're gonna be pretty much heavily carried by like other CDs. So yeah, I think Deathbringer feels pretty cool. Unfortunately, I think the additional like things they added here feel like the only thing that's noteworthy is Echoing Fury. Holy shit, outed. Echoing Fury. Reaper's Mark deals 5% increased damage, and casting Dancing Rune Weapon grants one stack of Exterminate with 100% first scythe and 100% second scythe. And so this is what is kind of allowing us to like it feel a little bit better when we hit Marrow Rend. I don't think Frigid Resolve and Deathly Blows really has much of an impact compared to some other hero talent side things that we talked about. I kind of forgot to mention it with the Sand Lane, but they did move around the additional things that they added, so I don't remember. I believe Transfusion was new. Honestly don't remember what's new, so I'm not going to even pretend to know. Um, but oh yeah, Desecrate. I'm just this video is gonna be all over the place. Desecrate feels really good, but it kind of feels like you need Blood-Soaked Ground just for survivability because you want to have the physical DR for all the auto attacks you're taking. So yeah. Now, speaking as someone who is like not super in tune with Death Knight and plays it like super casually and just tests it. So as basically what I'm saying is like as a novice or from an outsider's perspective, I feel like the tree, and again, like I've played with almost every talent. Like I feel Leeching Strike. This feels like a dead talent. It feels like you'll never ever play this. It feels terrible. Um, like even in best case scenario, you're cleaving like upwards of 8 targets with your Heart Strike. I believe you can cleave up to 8 with certain things. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But even let's just say you're hitting 5 targets that are afflicted by your Blood Plague. Like it's healing you for 1% of your health. That's it. Like that seems terrible. Um, and it feels like most of the talents over here are kind of beans. Maybe like again, maybe I'm wrong about that. But like I've tried playing everything from like Deadly Reach. I've tried playing around Improve Heartstrike. I've tried dropping Improve Vampiric, which I think is always a trap if you're playing Umbilicus. But it feels like all of these talents down on this side of the tree feel really, really bad. And I know there's a lot of bugs. So shout out to Kyrasis, but he did send me like this giant bug list. Now this was like a couple of months ago at this point. So this is a quick little like snippet of I'm not gonna go through every single thing here because I'll be honest, some of these felt really minor when I've gone through them. But basically, like this is the entire bug list currently for Death Knight. At least this is what like Kyrasis has found. And so there's clearly like a lot of things going on that are working against Death Knight currently. It feels like there's way more bugs littered throughout the class and the talent tree that other tanks aren't currently really dealing with as much outside of like weird interactions or modifiers off of like certain talents. But uh, most tanks don't feel as buggy, I would say. Anyways, kind of like wrapping things up, I do think Death Knight is playing really well in group content. I can't speak for Raid as much, but doing 15s last week before we were now in Mythic gear, it felt pretty good. I ended up doing like 2 15s, both like on Deathbringer and on Sand Lane, I think actually on stream with a lot of people bullying me. You guys got to chill on that. Uh, it plays fine. Like it's very fun. It's thematic. It has a nice group. It has really good Mythic Plus utility. I think everything from Death Grips to a Mass Grip to AoE Silence to Blinding Sleep to a single target stun to AMZ, like kind of a group AMS, not group AMS, but like a cleaving AMS. It's all really, really good. And of course, you always have like the typical beta cycle where like Death Knight's gonna be meta because it doesn't require a healer. Like that is like typical propaganda from most people in the community. It's not you're not seeing it much now, but, like, you can make the argument, like, Death Knight's really good because your healer can just, like, focus on healing the group, but the thing is, like, it's that normally doesn't really matter. There's other aspects to, tanking and why a tank is good. Like if their damage is bad or you just don't need the utility, it's like, well, okay. So just because you have a tank that lives forever doesn't mean that it's also like always the best tank. Anyways, I just wanted to yap a bit about this. I don't have as much to say besides the fact that like the talent tree feels extremely linear. Um it seems like there's a lot of dead talents, especially like leeching strikes and on the right side, and the apex talents are like really good, but also very RNG and can eat your cooldown, which feels bad. Anyways, I do plan on continuing testing Blood and Death Knight throughout the rest of the beta, and I'm gonna be hopefully doing like little mini guides here and there for it. But we'll have to see. Depends on my schedule. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy the video and the rants, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.